The American National Credit. March 29, 2019 by Anna von Reitz. For those of you who missed my partial rundown of what Americans are owed, you should all know that Americans are owed back the national credit, about $21 trillion worth of credit that has already been earned and which stands on the books of the Department of Defense. How did this American national credit accrue? For over 100 years, 1913 to date, we have been exchanging our actual goods, natural resources, and labor for I.O.U.s promissory notes called Federal Reserve Notes. We have never been paid. Via this mechanism, a vast national debt has been accumulated by the United States, Inc., and its corporate franchises known as citizens of the United States. There has also been a very substantial debt accrued by the British Territorial Government doing business, the United States of America, and its corporate franchises known as United States citizens. Taken together, this accounts for the U.S. national debt of about $21 trillion, which is owed entirely by these two kinds of U.S. citizens. We, Americans, have been falsely and purposefully misidentified as U.S. citizens with the clear object of making us responsible for paying the U.S. debt. At the same time, we have been declared missing and legally dead so as to prevent us from claiming all the credit that is in fact owed to us. It's a commercial fraud scheme designed to exchange pieces of paper for actual goods and services and never have to pay back anything to the victims. But in fact, we are very much alive and we are Americans, and we were, for most of us anyway, never knowingly, willingly, and voluntarily acting as U.S. citizens. We are owed the $21 trillion national credit. Why is the Department of Defense involved in holding our credit? This goes back to the Lieber Code issued as General Order 100 in 1863. It replaced all law and became the law of the British Territorial Government. Among other things, it made the U.S. Army responsible for protecting our money, but as they were also spending our money, there was a natural conflict of interest involved. So, they passed off the actual bookkeeping to their co-workers in the municipal United States government, the Department of Defense. As a result, a gigantic foreign credit began building up on the books of the Department of Defense. This foreign credit is largely owed to us. It represents the U.S. national debt on one side of the ledger, and the American national credit on the other side of the ledger. The problem is, we have never been able to access our credit. It was simply locked up on the false pretense that we were all dead and all our individual credit side accounts were closed, while debts continued to accrue against our fraudulently probated estates. Just like what happens when someone dies and their estate is probated, financial transactions continue after their death. Bills continue to come in and credits continue to accrue, sometimes for a long time. That's the system they have been using to pretend that we are dead on one hand, and yet still allow themselves to have access to our falsely constructed estates on the other. To finesse this gross breach of trust and financial fraud, they declared us authorized representatives of our own estates and held us responsible for paying all debts of the estates, without, however, giving us access to all the credit owed to us to offset these estate debts. Thus the foreign credit owed to us continued to accumulate on the books of the DoD, and the U.S. debt also continued to grow, and the municipal government strong arm racketeered us to pay up debts we never owed under the false pretense that we were all knowingly, willingly, and voluntarily acting as United States citizens, unpaid volunteers, no less. Of course, the perpetrators indoctrinated us to assume that we were U.S. citizens from an early age. They changed our political status records while we were still babies in our cradles and used coercion and semantic deceit to do it. In this way, by identity theft, mischaracterization, falsification of records, semantic deceit, impersonation, and probate fraud, they killed off all the Americans who are owed credit, and left nothing but the debt-bearing U.S. citizens behind. So they could wallow like cats in cream, give us monopoly money I.O.U.s that cost next to nothing for them to produce, and receive actual goods and labor in exchange. It was the ultimate capitalist dream. Something for nothing. And the Federal Reserve, acting in collusion with Seed and Company and the DTTC and WIPO and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, orchestrated all of it. We have the complete story and all the goods on all of them. For over 100 years the mysterious foreign credit kept on growing in the dark, and the U.S. national debt kept accruing. I almost hear the theme from Jaws playing in the background. To make a long story short, I observed that in a debt credit system, it is impossible to accrue a debt. All transactions in such a system are zero-sum transactions. For every debt, an answering credit is created. So like the old woman in the "Where's the Beef" commercial, I started the Hounds of Hell on a mission to find out, where's the American national credit? We found it in 2011. It's being held up by the Municipal Department of Defense and managed by the 7 grumpy old men, the military bankers responsible for the Office of Military Settlements, I.O.U.s in California. They have this albatross of criminal mismanagement firmly anchored around their respective necks and are still too stubborn to face the facts and return the credit where it's due, to the hard-working people of this country and their lawful government, the United States of America, unincorporated. Some things you can't go back to not knowing once you know them. This is one of those things. In order for them to pay you back the credit that is already accrued and owed to you, you have to come back from the dead, return from across the seas of BS paperwork, and record your presence on the land and soil as an American, born and bred. You have to raise your hand and say, "Hey, a mistake has been made. I'm an American state national, or American state citizen. I'm not any kind of U.S. citizen." And that is what we are doing by the hundreds, by the thousands, and soon by the millions. Here's the irony. The Department of Defense can wipe out most of the combined U.S. debt simply by transferring the credit to our lawful government and letting us establish a credit voucher system for Americans to offset debts. The U.S. citizens would be happy because all that U.S. debt would fall away off their shoulders. The Americans would be happy because they would also be free of debts that they have never in fact owed. This is just one of multiple fraud schemes and false claims associated with our assets. There's more, a lot more, and it is time for a reckoning. What can you do? Become aware, wake up, smell the Java. If you aren't actually a federal civilian or military employee, and receiving a payroll check, you have zero reason to adopt any form of U.S. citizenship. Your actual government is still here, still waiting for you to claim your true identity as an American. There's some paperwork to fill out and record. Go to www.annavonreitz.com, Article 928, go to www.americanstatesassembly.com. There's some technical issues, like new passports and travel cards instead of driver licenses, and cancellation of registrations to be resolved. There are vacant offices to be filled. There are state assemblies to fully populate. State courts to be staffed. Federal-level states of states need to be reconstructed. No doubt there's a lot of work in front of us, but we know where we are going and basically, how to get there. Once you have your paperwork on the record and your private records in order, it's time to sign in. Go to www.signanamerica.com. We are building the national database of Americans who have come home to the land and soil, both American state nationals and American state citizens. This database will allow the United States of America, unincorporated, to reclaim the assets we are owed and provide the political basis for Americans to take peaceful and proper action in their own behalf to 1. Reclaim all the constitutional guarantees, 2. Enforce the public law, 3. Enforce our international and commercial remedies, 4. Pre-screen people eligible to receive credit vouchers to offset U.S. debt, 5. Negotiate and issue proper passports, travel cards, and tax exemption certificates, 6. Operate the Republican form of government we are owed. We have plenty of slaves clinging to their chains as if they were security blankets, trying to scare everyone into accepting the status quo and going for another round of the same old fraud scheme, while they themselves hide behind fake names like Merlin, or Virgo Triad, or Sun Tzu. If I were trying to sell what these agents are pushing, I'd be hiding behind a fake name, too. But I am not hiding. I am standing here on my own and telling you the God's honest truth. Chances are that you are and have always been an American, not any kind of U.S. citizen at all. Chances are that you are owed more credit than you can even imagine, and shouldn't be paying any debts at all. No utility bills, either. Oh, and by the way, what happens to the American national credit if you don't stand up, get organized, and claim it? The commercial banks are pushing to have it all declared abandoned funds and given away as a sop to cover their sins.